Kresge is the kind of foundation that says it's okay to shake things up. When you're trying to battle things that are as pervasive as poverty, things that are as difficult and unjust as racism and inequities, you have to shake things up.
Kresge is one which makes highly considered, thoughtful decisions, and oftentimes is in advance of the rest of the philanthropic community in seeing the value of something.
This is 100 years of doing important fundamental things in communities, but also questioning how do we make the best use of every dollar? How do we maximize our impact? How do we focus to make sure that we're really good at a thing that is deeply important?
My great-grandfather, Sebastian, was the founder of the foundation, and he grew up on a farm in Pennsylvania. Poor family. They lost the farm at one point. He decided that ultimately farming wasn't for him and went to business school. He knew how to sell things and was successful.
It was from this small beginning that the company grew until today, with more than 700 stores and over 35,000 employees in the United States and Canada.
They grew and grew and grew and ultimately went from SS Kresge Company to the Kmart Corporation.
The best to you from Kmart Radio.
He made more money than he ever thought he'd want or need, and wanted to do something for the betterment of mankind. And so the foundation began then in 1924.
By the time of his death in 1966, Sebastian Kresge had donated more than $60 million to the foundation, making it one of the largest philanthropies in the U.S. In its early years, the foundation became known for making capital challenge grants.
Let's say they were going to build a building for $5 million, and so we might make a grant for $750,000 to help encourage donors to come forward. We were building facilities all over the country and occasionally overseas.
To have civic buildings, places where the arts are performed, where people can gather, where you can, find books, music, and other kind of cultural resources from your city, that's what makes a place a place.
One of the things that was said was, buildings are where people are born, where they learn, where their hearts swoon, where they get inspired, where they die. So buildings and facilities are critically important.
Former Kresge president John Marshall took this model of grant making to its peak form during his 27 years at the foundation.
He was a huge believer in the Capital Challenge grant model. He had seen the work that was done across the country and really believed that it had a lot of value. He had a very disciplined approach to finding out what the community needed and then accelerating the process so that we could achieve it.
The Kresge name, it's a seal of approval. This is something that's worthy of investing in. It's something that's going to be transformational.
The Kresge Foundation helps institutions learn how to do more private fundraising, not seeking federal support, not seeking state support, but with a real emphasis on private individual giving. That's the gift that keeps on giving.
What was so interesting about the received traditions at Kresge was that they were really good. They were really well done, and they had been honed over 20, 30 years.
By the time of John Marshall's retirement in 2006, Kresge had awarded upwards of 10,000 challenge grants, totaling more than $3 billion, and the foundation was on the search for new leadership. In the words of then board chair Elaine Rosen, we wanted to do more, to do it better, and to have a more significant impact within the fields we have traditionally supported. It was the right time to take Kresge's nearly $4 billion in assets out for a ride. They found someone to do just that in Rip Rapson.
When Rip arrived, he said, is there a way that we can engage more in the critical issues of our time?
Could we be more strategic in what we funded, and could we have more impact beyond buildings?
How do you optimize the value of philanthropy?
I think the way to describe a leader like Rip Rapson, but also really the extraordinary talented people of the Kresge Foundation, is that they combine really deep knowledge. They understand how to do really complex work, but they do it in a way that also brings a lot of humility to the work, that they're listening to community leaders, community people, and understanding what they want, how they envision their future and their city and their opportunity.
If you think about Kresge's Capital Challenge Grant work as just a box of a certain kind of capital investment, what would happen if we actually thought about different forms of capital? Could you try something that was really innovative, give people some working capital to figure out something completely new that they hadn't thought about? So I said, why don't we start with that sort of question of sort of stretching the capital spectrum? So no, it's no longer a box, it's sort of a stretch. And a number of people said that that would be fine, but we still don't have any standard by which we would judge. We're just expanding, and so we have to have some way of narrowing that down. And so why don't we think about a series of values? And I said, so no one of those values would be a gate. It just would be a weight. And so if you put all of those values and applied it to this capital stretch, it begins to help you curate.
These values help the foundation establish funding priorities in fields such as the environment, arts and culture, health, human services, education, and community development.
And we developed a strategy for each one and then allocated grant dollars to those. It was energizing.
This expanded Kresge's philanthropic impact across many types of fields, requiring new expertise for each one.
Capital moves into an arts field differently from how it moves into health, just different from how it moves into education. This became something of a roadmap for us, and we sort of began aligning our investments in very different ways. But then 2013 came around, and this sort of small matter of the largest municipal bankruptcy in the history of the United States hit Detroit.
Congress was not going to bail out the city of Detroit. So we had to get creative and figure out what federal resources were in the pipeline that could be moved more quickly, what were ways that the federal government could sort of bolster the civic architecture of the city, the civic leadership, so that it was clear that the federal government, the city itself, and its civic leaders were all on the same side. And the clear lead in that effort in the city of Detroit was the Kresge Foundation.
It was really an extraordinary inflection point for the city of Detroit, and by this time, Kresge was sort of caught right in the middle of it in a way that, called on all of the kind of tools that we had hoped to develop and hoped to employ.
And what the Grand Bargain did was bring some great minds, some creativity, and commitment to the city and the city's future. It drastically minimized the negative impacts that the bankruptcy would have on people who had worked hard for the city of Detroit for decades.
A lot of other people ran away, but Kresge never left. And as Detroit was heading to bankruptcy, it was the Kresge Foundation that stepped up on the riverfront, stepped up on the Q line, stepped up at Marygrove College, stepped up on the Grand Bargain. And we were very fortunate. They've been a big part of our recovery.
It was only as we emerged from the bankruptcy, it was only as we began working in other places that we realized that there was a very different model of philanthropy. We were both local and we were national. We were both discipline-based and we were place-based. We used not just grant-making tools, but we used loan tools and other forms of social capital. The aggregate impact was something I couldn't have imagined ever.
Kresge's experience helping Detroit through the bankruptcy taught it lessons other cities were looking to learn. So, the foundation began to deepen its work in other places, such as Memphis, New Orleans, and Fresno.
Kresge has this big picture framework, let's really understand the city at its sort of most complex levels and try to understand how the interventions at multiple levels will really affect the health of the city. And Kresge, I believe, because of where it's working and the way it's working, is learning things about how those cities work that is really groundbreaking.
What makes Kresge stand apart is its real fundamental understanding of how cities work. It's not a top-down effort. It is really side-by-side, deep appreciation of how hard the work is.
We would not be here were it not for the Kresge Foundation. I will get out there with our team and really have to push hard. I could only push that hard knowing that I have the Kresge Foundation at my back.
It's not just important to get the funding, that is very important because organizations like ours need that trust factor in a philanthropic partner, but it also is just as important to have that intellectual thought relationship with a group that can help us apply our ideas and visions into something that is sustainable.
It takes a very consistent, long-term, patient approach, especially when program dollars and capital are involved. Kresge has proven over a very long period of time that they understand that and that they're willing to go along for the ride.
It also demonstrates, I think, a real humility on the part of Rip and his team. They know how to do a lot of stuff and they have a lot of answers, but they understand that it's not just about showing up with answers, it's about showing up in a listening mode in order to develop a body of work that is real and meaningful and engages the people that it's intended to benefit.
I never dreamed that we would be where we are now, that we would diversify our tools as we have, that we would work in multiple places as we have, that we would have contributed to the revitalization of one of the great iconic cities of the world as we have, and that we would have built a philanthropic way of working that is distinctive in American philanthropy. So I'm hoping that when we look back in 5 or 10 or 20 years, we will see Kresge's influence in cities being broader and more profound.